The XHL is back, baby. Let's go. We've got the California Crush being introduced as the new expansion team. The team they replaced would be the Idaho Steelhead. So if you remember, the two worst teams have to play each other, and the team that loses gets relegated. So that would be the Toledo Walleye last year and the Idaho Steelheads. They played, they duked it out, and Idaho lost their franchise in a shootout. A very unfortunate situation, but it is what it is. So guys, up on the screen, you can see the California Crush are now having an expansion draft. And you can see next to the right of the player name, 83 overall there for Kirill Stichov. He's actually going to stay with California. I did actually not include him in the spin at some point, but he's going to stay with California. So they still have a good player. But a guy like Cody Eakin is at the top of the list. He doesn't have an overall rating. That signifies that he was released by an XHL custom team. So Cody Eakin was released by the Rampage, the Charleston Rampage. Everybody else was either let go from the non-XHL teams, so like Sarnia, Flint Firebirds, Greenville Swamp Rabbits, Savannah Ghost Pirates, these teams. And their range that they needed to give up was 65 overall or higher. XHL custom teams like Charleston or Baltimore or Richmond, they had to get rid of a 70-plus overall player. And there weren't very many of those guys. There was a lot of those dudes that were 75-plus. So some really good talent here for California. So we can see the wheel spinning here, and I know that the argument should be made that a lot of these guys that they're taking are pretty low overall, that they should be taking guys like that 78. Like they should be taking Cody Eakin. They should be taking guys that were cut in that 70-plus overall range. But I didn't want to cheese it that way. I didn't want to make them too good, but I didn't also want to make them too bad. So I left it up to the wheel spin. And a lot of the guys that they're taking were from the Idaho team that was relegated. So all those players got put back into the expansion draft pool, and California could decide if they were going to take them or not. So I'm going to let this thing spin out, and I will tell you guys the results in Discord in just a moment as we see this pick here. What do we got? We have a 66 overall AJ White. All right, guys, so here's the results of the expansion draft here for the California Crush. So inside of our XHL Ambassadors channel, you know, I do have quite a bit of support here, a lot of admins here for the XHL and guys that are helping me with kind of what the rationale should be for each XHL team. I'm pretty much managing the non-XHL custom teams. So as far as the draft goes, I'll be making decisions for them through wheel spin or if I think something's smart for them to do. But overall, the ambassadors are playing a pretty heavy role for the actual XHL teams. So I did communicate to them that, you know, I wish that California would have taken a little bit more of those 70-plus overall guys, but I think that it's probably a good thing that it didn't happen that way just because I didn't want them to get, like, too good. If they took all of those 77s or those 75s that were in the expansion draft, I think that they probably would have been one of the better rated rosters in the XHL, so they would have immediate success as an expansion team. But here are your results here. So we've got Aksentiuk as a 73. That's a winger. You got Sean McBride, William Kinirim, that's 62. We got Alexei Kupski, so a couple goalies taken there. Louis Domingue is 77. That was a really good pick for them. Probably the top picks, I would say, would be Luke Vinskov for Tucson. So he was let go in the expansion draft. Zadie Wisdom for 74, Domingue at 77, Baldwin's going to be a good player. So Idaho, comparatively, if you compared this roster to what Idaho had last year, I think this roster beats them probably 8 times out of 10. So I think that they did improve through this process, but the players that were available for them, they could have taken Clendenning, they could have taken Sutter, they could have taken Mason Mitchell, Kenneth Klum, who's a custom player, they could have taken Townley. So there's still some really good players that were still available for them. These guys that were let go into the expansion draft will now be free agents. So now every XHL team has a chance at grabbing these players. But we're not going to do free agency in this video. We'll do it after the draft because what I really want to focus on is I want to do the draft first. That way that the XHL teams have an idea of who to go after in free agency. Quite personally, I would rather draft a young guy, allow him to play, versus signing a guy like, let's say, anybody who's old or something like Sutter, and then finding yourselves in a situation where you have to take a center in the draft. Now you're stuck because now Sutter's blocking your center, right? So I kind of like the idea of doing the free agency second and then the draft first. So now let's go ahead and talk about how the draft is going to work. So for the draft, we had 12 submitted prospects. This could be through channel supporters or through Patreon supporters, and these are your 12 players here. So we got Tanae Likeke, a center, Riley Sting, Barnaby, Jakob Magnuson, Joseph Hawk Jr., OJ Cooper. We got the Cooper brothers here, OJ and Axel, Ferb, Pinker's a goalie, Elliott Bridge. Some pretty good players right there. But that's not enough to do a draft. We got 28 teams and only 12 players that were submitted. So I had to create a few. Sean Donaldson, Pierre Lafleur, Daniel Gabranson, Patrick Hollander, Marcel Radoslav. So all these dudes are guys that I created. I tried to get it a nice balance between goalies and defensemen and wings and centers. But yeah, overall I think that Casper Zygmunt is probably my favorite player, so I'm a little biased there. I had 185 overall inside my mix, so I thought that that was fair to do. So that's your draft pool of players right there. Now if we wanted to sort this by overall rating, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 85 overall players. Those are the elite level players. I think that that's a pretty good mix there. 6 out of 28 slots. And then you had from 80 to 75, we got a nice big chunk there. And then to bottom it out, we have the 70 overall players too. So I think this is a very well-balanced draft class here for season number 2. Now, what ended up happening is that I went through the entire draft order, and then up until I got to the XHL ambassadors that are a little bit more active, that's when I pinged them and I let them know, hey, you're on the clock, so let me know who you want to take. I do admittedly have some ambassadors that are inactive, so I had to either wheel spin for them or make the choice for them that I thought was the most intelligent. So, but here's the draft order. Of course, the California Crush being our expansion team, taking over the Idaho Steelheads. That is going to be the number 1 overall pick. We've got Toledo coming up in number 2, and a lot of the non-XHL custom teams happening here, popping up at least until number 15. So 15 starts the XHL customs at Charleston. Then we got Newfoundland, Utah, then Baltimore, Tucson, KC. The Dukes actually have the Atlanta Flames first round pick here because they did have a trade, if you guys remember that video, to go out and acquire some good pieces at the trade deadline. Then we have Brooklyn, Dakota, Seattle, Richmond, Albuquerque, and then Houston, Tampa Bay rounding out the draft. So we're only going to do one round. I'm not going to go, crazy with the NHL, the XHL draft with round 2, round 3, round 4. That's just a lot of custom prospects to create. And, it would be a whole different thing if we had this inside of a franchise mode, which we don't. It's season mode. So it's all on me to replicate how a franchise file would work. So it is a lot of work, and you guys can tell because it's been about a month since we last uploaded this series. So let's get into the draft. We have up on the screen our list of players listed by overall rating. So how this is going to work is if I go back to Discord here, and if you're not in our Discord, make sure that you are, because this is kind of where I talk to my ambassadors, my XHL ambassadors. So they're not managing the team, but they are giving me some of their input to take me out of the equation, basically, because I could go here and I could be accused of cheesing it up for the non-XHL custom teams to take one of the worst players available and leave all the best and the goodies for our custom teams. They have given me a list of top 5 players that they like, and if those players are available for them, great. When their slot comes up, perfect. But we're going to go ahead and go through all of our picks up until we get to one of those top 5 guys. And we'll run the draft that way. So first up on the board would be the California Crush. Then we got the Toledo Walleye. and then Wichita Thunder. So the very first pick of the XHL year number 2 draft, as we head into year number 3, will be Luke Sullivan. So this is where it gets kind of fun for me, is that we have scouting departments. You know, sometimes teams, they like certain guys. They fall in love with certain guys. They might not have valued the 85 overall player as much as other teams do. So, you know, they like Luke Sullivan. The number 1 overall pick will be the left wing for the California Crush. Next up, we have the Toledo Walleye and then the Wichita Thunder. So Toledo, I'm hoping that they get one of the 85 overall players. They need something like that to get them over the hump. They're gonna select the 80 overall Alec Reginald, a butterfly goalie. So that's actually a really good pick for them, because they did lose Elijah Bond in a trade, if you remember, at the trade deadline. He wanted out, he wasn't happy, and so now they get another goaltender here, another a young guy, a youthful player here in Alec Reginald. Next up, the Wichita Thunder. Who are they going to select? We'll find out here. They're going to go ahead and take 75 overall Michael Bennett. That is a two-way forward winger, so he can play both left and right wing. That's one of my guys that I created. Next up, let's go Sarnia, Indy, and South Carolina. Sarnia, what you got? What you got? 75 overall David Behringer. Yeah, maybe. Oh, it's teetering. David Behringer, offensive defenseman there for Sarnia. Next up for Indy, the Fuel. Remember, they drafted a really nice player in Moncava. It's a Patreon guy. Had himself a really nice rookie year. Was inside of the conversation for Rookie of the Year, but as we know, Dykstra ended up winning that one. Burrow Nasus is a playmaking right winger. That's going to be good for them to pair up with Moncava. After that, we're going to go with South Carolina and Iowa. South Carolina is going to take Caden Yorick. Looks like a hybrid goaltender. Yep. Okay. Hybrid goalie there for South Carolina. Next up, Iowa. Iowa is in need of an offensive player. They don't need a goalie at that point. They have Timmy Gula, who's a very good player. And they're going to take Pierre Lafleur, a butterfly goalie. So I don't know about that one. I'm not a big fan of that one. Maybe they might be looking to trade Timmy Gula. He's awesome, but they could get a lot out of that if they go that route. Iowa, Flint, Savannah. So that's next. Flint and Savannah. Flint will take... Ooh. O.J. Cooper. Playmaker, right wing. That's good for them. They took defense last year in Murgatroyd. So now they get a good offensive player. Next up here will be Riley Sting going to the Savannah Ghost Pirates. An enforcer defenseman, 85 overall player. That's really nice for them. All right, next up, Hartford would be our first team popping up for the XHL. And then Greenville and Allen. So Hartford, they took Sport Billico, number 1, if you remember that, from season number 1's draft. And now they're going to go ahead and take Brennan Osborne, a sniper, left wing. So there's some good players still up on the board, but, you know, Hartford did this last year. They took Sport Billico, and a lot of people didn't think that he was worthy of the number 1 overall pick, but, man, he played out. He played really, really well. So they might know what they're doing, I guess. Greenville and then Allen coming up. Greenville will take Teddy Bernard. So the Swamp Rabbits get a really nice player there, playmaking center. Next up, we've got Allen and Kalamazoo. Allen is going to take JT Barley, a right-wing playmaker. Kalamazoo, I know that Kalamazoo really wants one of the Coopers. One of them was already taken, so they're going to go with Patrick Hollander, playmaking center. And of course, you guys don't know who these players are at all. Like, these are all just custom guys, but I did want to document it at least so that we know where guys are going. So we got Orlando, Charleston, and Newfoundland. So Orlando, they took a guy by the name of De Flamingo. He's very flamboyant with his colors and, you know, just goes with the name. So they're going to take Jake Balfour, an enforcing center. So they go a little bit more power, right? So they went finesse last year. Now they go a little bit more power. So that's Orlando's pick. Next up will be Charleston and then Newfoundland. Charleston, they needed some of those 85s. You know, they need a guy to get them over the top, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So Marcel Radoslav, a sniper right winger. Again, I could be wrong. We had a guy like Sport Bilico play well last year. Had a couple other guys that were decently overall rated, not the best, but you know, they played out for their respective teams. We'll see how this all plays out for Charleston, but there's still a lot of good talent left up on the board. So Newfoundland took Neil Till. That's right, Neil Till, the goaltender last year, and he played really well. So they're going to need some offense. They're going to go with a little bit of a balanced look there for their center, Atticus Barnaby, formerly a part of the Alaska Huskies franchise, if y'all remember that series. But this is, of course, not the same Atticus Barnaby. That is a different universe completely. But 80 overall, good pick for Charleston. And now we get out to Utah at the number 17 pick. Let's see what they're going to go after. We got a ton of really good talent still up on the board. Casper Zygmunt, Joseph Hawk, Jakob Magnuson. They're going to go with Sean Donaldson, a sniper left wing. So there's something must be happening as far as draft stories goes. There's must be something going on with these 85 overall players here. Something that, like, are there character issues going on? Are there injuries to be talked about here? So pretty crazy that this is where we're at right now. Just a lot of really good talent still left up on the board. So as we're almost done with the draft, let's just kind of reset the board here real quick. We got Sullivan going to the Crush. We got Reginald, the goaltender, going to the Walleye. And then we see a list here of all of the other prospects that were taken. So as far as like customs go, they're all custom technically, but as far as like guys that were submitted, you have Burrow Niesis. That was the first guy as far as customs go that was taken to Indy. And then you've got O.J. Cooper, Riley Sting, Teddy Bernhard, J.T. Barley, and Atticus Barnaby. So the guys that are still up on the board, we're now getting into the XHL custom teams territory. And as I talked about before, a lot of these teams have ambassadors. So you can see actually in our Discord here, we have ambassador roles that provided me a top 5 of the players that they were interested in. Although I have not heard from Baltimore, I have heard from Tucson, and we'll take a look at what they wanted to go with their top 5. But Baltimore, I haven't heard from them, so I'm going to actually make their pick for them. So I think that they should probably go with Casper Zygmunt here for Baltimore. They need a lot of offensive firepower. They've just been kind of a team that they move the puck well in gameplay, but for whatever reason, they find ways to lose to other squads. They have a good goaltender. They've got decent defense. I think they need a guy that they can really lean on and hang on to. This guy could end up winning Rookie of the Year. They had one of their main opponents in the Eastern Conference, Dykstra, winning the Rookie of the Year last year for Richmond. So I think that they see that, and they probably think that this is literally the best player that's left up on the board. You got Pinkert, a goalie, Magnuson, a defenseman, another goalie with Joseph Hawk. I think this is the right pick for them. So Casper Zygmunt going to go to Baltimore. So Tucson's ambassador gave me his top 5. You got Jakob Magnuson, who's still up left on the board. Everyone else 2 through 5 doesn't matter. Magnuson's their number 1 guy. That's who they're going to go with. Got some breaking news here. Jamal Kendrickson, the goalie for Atlanta, that was just drafted last year, is going to get traded for a goaltender that was just drafted last year too, Neil Till, to Newfoundland. So they swap goalies. The two teams swap. And, it's a kind of a one-for-one deal. Maybe they thought that they're getting a little bit better at goalie. And both teams thought that this trade works for them. So good trade for both teams. I kind of speak for the non-XHL teams. Good value being sent on both sides. I don't think anyone really gets screwed here. Now, Kansas City trades Daniel Brodeur. This is kind of shocking. But they're going to get Timmy Gula. And I think the talent gap between Brodeur and Gula, Brodeur was really good. For where he was as an overall rating, like a 75 overall player. He has seen a lot of progression over the last few years, so he is on the ascension. And for Kansas City, knowing that, Alex Lyon is their backup at this point to Brodeur, Lyon's no slouch either. But he's getting older, and Brodeur is on the come up, but they must have seen something to say, like, Gula, we think Gula projects a lot better than what Brodeur can put out. So Kansas City's going to go with Tane Likeke, the center, and I think that's a good pick for them. Tane Likeke, playmaker center. I thought that they would have gone with a defensive player, especially after trading away one of their young defensemen there for Timmy Gula, but they're going to go with Tane Likeke, a center that's going to pair up nicely on another line with Alexeev and Pressonen, a lot of those really top-notch forwards. So Likeke probably going to be a nice player on line 3, probably line 4. So the Dukes will now take 75 overall Alex Oda, an offensive defenseman. Good pick for them, probably the best value for them right now. They've got a lot of goalies up on the board. Don't really need a goalie at this point. So, I think that might be the smart move. 3 goalies, 85 to 80 overall in total. They've got a lot of offensive pieces as it is. Probably the best move for them. And since we don't have a ambassador for Charleston, pretty interesting trade right here. So Charleston trades with Albuquerque. So they just took Alex Oda, the defenseman, and they have now traded away Rhino Power, who was talked about. He's an XHL champion, but the way that things are going with Charleston, he's just very frustrated with the organization. He wanted out. So he's now out. He goes to Albuquerque, and they gave up their first-round pick, 26, and Aiden Steinbrenner, a center who was admittedly frustrated too because there's nowhere for him to play. He's currently playing on the wing when he's a natural center, so he just wasn't really getting the full, value of what he can provide to a team by playing center. So, yeah, Steinbrenner's going to move out here to Charleston, and he's going to look to play this position that he's good at, right? His center position. Plus, now they get that first-round pick with a lot of good talent left up on the board. This makes a lot of sense for both teams, and Charleston now probably looking at one of these goaltenders to kind of replace Keegan Finch, who is, he had a decent season, but not to the level at which he won the XHL Finals MVP. So with Brooklyn, they need another winger, but they're not going to go that route. So we did get their top 5 list, and they are going to go with Axel Cooper, a sniping center, 75 overall player. Very good value for them. They need some winger help. Not so much center help, but I know that they do have some centers that can kind of shift over to wing, where Axel Cooper can actually play that center position. Now, what I probably would have considered, what I probably would have done, is taken one of these 85 overall goaltenders. Could you imagine having an 85-plus overall Robert Borhoff, who has been admittedly shaky? You could add another 85 overall goaltender, kind of push him a little bit. Plus, consider the fact, like, when Borhoff starts to get a little fatigued, you don't have to play him again in back-to-back nights. You've got another rock-solid goaltender to back that up. So basically every single game for Brooklyn, they have a fully healthy, fully energized goaltender, and they're good goaltenders. It's not like you're getting, Aaron Dell, who's now 35 years old. He's starting to regress a little bit. The talent differential there from Borhoff to Dell, you don't really have that right in that situation. Now you have like a Joseph Hawk or a Pinkard right there backing up Borhoff. And now you got a 1-2 punch that really is a stone wall back there. It's not going to show any cracks in these games. That's what I would have probably considered, probably what I would have done. But they're going to go on the offensive side and try to extend their lines out. Now, Dakota is interesting because they have 2 young goaltenders as it is, but they don't have a lot of talent when it comes to those goaltenders. So, for me, I don't want to railroad those custom players because you guys are probably still viewing the channel and viewing the series. I don't want to railroad your player. So, I'm going to avoid taking the goalies here, and they are going to go ahead and take Dylan Archer, the two-way center. And I think that they get good value there at a 75 overall. Again, they need some more offensive type of weapons. I've talked about this probably ad nauseum over the last 2 seasons that we've watched Dakota. they were a lot better of a team in year 2 than they were in year 1. Year 1, they were just kind of that goon squad. They were really heavily enforcer laden. So now that they have, got Ibragimov and they've got some other offensive pieces to that team, they've become more of a complete team. So now in Season 3's draft, you go ahead and you take that center. I think that they're going to do well for that pick. So now we move out to Seattle, and I think what Seattle's missing, they're amazing offensively. They don't have a lot of wiggle room to go ahead and take a guy like Elliot Bridge or Daniel Gabranson. They could develop him. They could hide those players on their third and fourth line. But I think where they're really going to see a lot of value is going out and getting a goaltender. Right now, what they've got going on with Ty Walker Jr. and Corey Schneider, Schneider's since retired. He's donezo. So they need another goaltender. And I think if they can move Ty Walker Jr., who has had some games in gameplay where he's really good and some others that are really, really bad, gives up a lot of goals. I think if they can draft a guy like Joseph Hawk Jr., a stand-up goaltender, he's an 85 overall. He's immediately their best starting goalie. You move Walker to the backup spot, and he takes Schneider's role. So now that team is just completely loaded. Their defense is solid. Their offense is probably one of the best in the XHL. Now you get a really, really good goaltender, and it's crazy that these goalies have fallen down to this level in the draft. These guys should have been one of the top players to be taken, but as you know, the wheel decides, and scouting departments for the non-XHL custom teams like Sarnia and Flint and Greenville, they decided to go elsewhere. So pretty interesting development there. I think Seattle got lucky with that pick. So now we move over here to Richmond. I think that with them, they're probably going to need another winger or a forward at this point. I am going to actually remove these two players here, the two goalies, and spin the wheel for them. Now, the other two picks that I made for the XHL custom teams, I did have a top 5 for them, but their top 5 players have been selected. So we're going to go the different route. I'm going to make the picks for them. For Richmond, though, they don't need a goaltender. I know that for a fact. They've got Caden Primo. They've got another custom goalie. They just don't need a guy like that. So rather than picking between these two forwards for them, I'm going to have the wheel spin, decide it, and it's going to be Elliot Bridge, the two-way forward, and that'll be their selection. So then we'll just re-add the two goalies there. So good pick for Richmond. They need a little bit of help. I think they should have probably gone defenseman if there was one there. You're only as good as what the board provides you. I was hoping that they would have been able to address that position, but just nothing there. And so with 3 players left to go, guys, we have Charleston, Houston, and Tampa Bay. So for Charleston, we don't have an ambassador for Charleston. I made that trade with Albuquerque to get rid of Rhino Power, and I think with this pick, we should be taking Ferb Pinkard 100%, and that's what we're going to go with. We're not going to have to spin the wheel at all. So 85 overall goaltender, that's going to replace Keegan Finch. He's going to be moving to the backup spot, and I think that it's crazy how you win an XHL championship and then you get bounced in the first round of the playoffs the next year. There's like heads are rolling in Charleston. So I think it's a good addition. Again, like when a great player falls to your lap like that, you got to do something. You got to take that guy. So Charleston just gets immediately better with goaltending by taking Ferb Pinkard. Now for Houston, I'm going to go ahead and make this pick for them too, for just being intelligent. But I think Yaroslav Andre is probably the answer here as an 80 overall player. I think that they go this route just because, Braden Holtby's not going to be around forever. And they do have a nice goaltender, a nice backup for them in Pablo Ricci. But, is he going to be the guy that vaults them? I don't know. They're going to have a 1-2 punch eventually with Ricci and Andre. So it's a good pick for them. And then, of course, the last pick will be 70 overall Daniel Gabranson going to the Tampa Bay Sunmutts. And, guys, that wraps up the XHL draft. So a lot of moving parts here, a lot of fun stuff, and I'm going to have a free agent update for you guys in the coming days. We're going to have an entire free agency process. All the guys that were not taken in the expansion draft by the California Crush, they have now moved to free agency. So now that the draft has all been settled up, we got teams that know kind of where these guys are going to slot, where these guys are going to fall into on the lines, and what their depth chart looks like. Now they're going to be able to determine, like, okay, so who do we want to go after in free agency? So fun stuff in the XHL. I hope you guys had an enjoyable time watching this video. It was fun to kind of put this all together, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Pretty crazy, again, that Luke Sullivan was the #1 overall pick. There was a lot of 85 overall players that were left up on the board, and you know, I think they did okay as far as the expansion draft goes for them. It wasn't terrible. It was all right, but they could have done a lot better. If it were up to me, I would have definitely cheesed it. I would have been like taking, you know, Louis Domingue, and I would have been taking, you know, all the 70-plus overall players, all of them. But instead, you know, they stuck with those 62s and the 65s, and so it's gonna they're gonna play like an expansion team still. I think they won't be as bad as Idaho was. Especially with Kirill Stichov, their rookie last year. Now he's a one-year pro, so he's got some better players around him at this point, so they should be a lot better, but, you know, again, we'll see how it all plays out. And I think that some teams, if you want to, like, who won the draft, I'd be curious to see what you guys think and what team you think won the draft. I would honestly say, I think just as far as, like, a value perspective, I think that that Baltimore, I think Baltimore won the draft. I really do. Like 18th, and they selected an 85 overall player in Casper Zygmunt. He's going to be a guy to watch out for sure. A couple other 85 guys were goaltenders. We had an enforcer that was an 85 overall. A lot of decent 70 and 75 overall forwards as well. But I think when you start looking at this list, Riley Sting, an 85 defenseman. Teddy Bernhardt for Greenville. You know, he might be a really good player too, but I think that when you consider that Greenville doesn't have the talent around Teddy, and Baltimore does for Casper, I think Casper Zygmunt might be on the road to winning Rookie of the Year. That'd be kind of my pick, but it's way too early for that. But I'm curious. You guys haven't seen these dudes in gameplay. You have no idea who they are, but, you know, based on the teams and the rosters, like, I would love to know, what do you think? You know, who's going to win Rookie of the Year? Who are winners of the draft? But that's it, guys. Leave a like if you like this thing, and let me know in the comment section below what you thought. And I will be having a free agent video here coming up in the next few days, and then we'll create all the prospects here that you see up on the list, and we'll get ready for season number 3 for the XHL here on the GG Extra channel. Guys, I'll see you in the next one. As always, thanks so much for watching, and peace.